Who are you?
I'm a psychic medium and a plant medicine guide. I had several kind of experiences with spirit. My mom actually read tarot and she would practice on me sometimes.
How do you know whether or not this is all bullshit?
I have people and clients who I teach how to develop their psychic abilities.
Were you always keeping this deeper connection to spirit?
I realize all these patterns and cycles.
Through mythology, we create entities.
When I was feeling kind of down, I would call upon the spirit of the Pillsbury Doughboy.
Welcome to today's episode of Getting to Know You. I'm your host, Cameron Edward Benton, and on today's episode, I have the great pleasure of introducing you to Pheroze Karai. Pheroze is a friend of mine who is a psychic medium, a creative growth coach, and a plant medicine guide. One of my favorite things about Pheroze is he is a deeply grounded and practical and living in this world spiritual person. You won't hear him going off into flights of fancy or going into some sort of manic episode or just speaking about a bunch of things that don't make any sense. One of the things that was really cool about this conversation is we got to talk about what actually is spirit. What is the spiritual realm from his experience of that? Like, what does that actually do? What are the things that he is speaking with or connecting to? And how does that all work? And he gave us some really, really cool explanations, experiences, and definitions. He also talks about, what to do if you're an empath. You walk into a room and you are just highly sensitive, how to build up your energy, how to stay grounded as a spiritual person. And he gives his own personal journey and account of some of his earliest psychic experiences. Pheroze is an incredible human being. He makes a massive impact on a lot of different people in this world, and I'm so grateful to have him on the show. So without further ado, here is Getting to Know Pheroze Karai. Who are you?
I'm Pheroze. I'm a psychic medium and a plant medicine guide.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And how did you get into being a psychic medium and a plant medicine guide?
Holy crap. All right. It's basically my life story. So it's like, well, I'll start with psychic medium. So basically when I was a little kid, I had several kind of experiences with spirit. And I'm originally from India. I grew up in India in the Middle East. And so I had several experiences with spirit and just a lot of just cognizance of spirit around me and just kind of like conversations I was having with them. And as I grew older, while my family was open, to that stuff, it was never like, oh, okay, well, you really need to kind of like look into this and pursue this or do something with that. With most things that I was doing, including like creative stuff that I was into and whatnot, it was more like, oh, well, that's nice. What are you going to do with your life? So I kind of like just had that going on in the background at a certain point when I was, starting when I was probably around 12 or so, 12, 13. But then later on in high school, it just kind of started coming up again. For me, just as far as like just being almost like just feeling like there was like a knocking at the door for me to just kind of like be in it more. So I started kind of exploring the other things that kind of go around with that, whether it's tarot or, just energy work and, things like that. Like, and all I had at the time, because we're talking about the 90s here, was really books. It's like, so I had books. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have like mentors or anything at that point. And my mom actually read tarot and she would practice on me sometimes. And so I would have her, so I would just take her books and teach myself. And then I was at a summer program at the Berklee College of Music. I'm a guitar player and a singer. Right before I went to college. So after my senior year of high school. And I just started, I started asking people if they, wanted readings. Because I was like, well, let me try and put this stuff into practice. And I felt very self-conscious about it. Just because, like, it was, it's very much like putting yourself out there as, like, who's this weird dude. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
but it would just be outside, like, on the sidewalk, and it would be like quick 15 minutes, and to be out, like, and I would pretend to read their palm. But I wasn't actually reading the palm. I was just reading them and their energy, and and talking to their guides. But I felt I had to have something, like, that was like concrete there for them to kind of think about. And everyone, I probably read about 6, 7 people, throughout that, just that summer, and everyone was like, "Wow, like that. How did you do that?"
Mm-hmm.
So so that gave me a little bit of, like, I don't know, encouragement in that way. Um, then when I moved to New York, a few years in, I met a mentor of mine, still a really, really, really good friend and mentor of mine. I met him in a reading. It was very serendipitous, and we ended up going on a road trip. And he kind of took me under his wing and just kind of really taught me a lot of things about my just yeah, about working with spirit, and then also just about grounding myself, because I was having, like, a problem that I see is very common with people, not only other people who are psychics or mediums, but people who are more uh, on the empathetic side, or more empaths, I would say, where you're very kind of sensitive to people around you, and very sensitive when you walk in a room and groups, and you get tired around other people a lot. I would have that a lot, and I would just be exhausted all the time. So you really kind of helped me kind of, you know, develop ways to kind of not be that.
Okay.
Um, but then in about, after that, and then I just kept studying. And I also got into herbalism. And that kind of, like, was my, intro to kind of plant medicine overall. So I got into herbalism. I got into, just learning about auras and energy, and just whatever I could kind of work with at the time. But over the years, this all kind of was very much what I did on the side, or what I did, like, in private, almost, while I would talk to some people about it. um in the back of my head, there was this conditioning again of, like, oh, what is it you're actually going to do with your life, Feroze? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a couple things. I'm a musician, so I and had some success with that. And then I needed to earn some real money. At a certain point, I lived in New York, and so I got into office jobs and working in the corporate world, for a good 20 years. um so you know when I moved to California about 8 years ago, I was still working at a consultancy, and I was doing digital strategy. And then right before COVID hit, I got laid off right when COVID hit. And the kind of calls to doing my own thing just kept getting louder and louder for me. And, I found my way into just saying, okay, I'm going to commit to these two things that I really love doing, and that I'm really, good at. One is plant medicine,
Mm-hmm.
and the other is, working with people in a psychic medium capacity, to help. Um, and I started just kind of putting myself out there with that, and developing, my business around that, and that took off.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also like, what I found at the time was, like, it wasn't that I was not trying to get another job. It was just that every opportunity I had kept getting blocked. And that's something you got to look at. I never had a problem getting a job before. I have a great resume, but I was getting referred by VCs,
Mm-hmm.
and just, like, CEOs of other companies, like big companies, and for positions here and there, and I would get all the way to the end, and then something would happen. They change the role, or, oh, we have to do an internal hire. Something would happen. And after that kept happening, I was just like, okay, I think I need to do my own thing. you
Mm.
know
Yeah.
and that just kept getting stronger and stronger for me. So once I finally committed to this, things really kind of opened up and took off for me in a few ways. One is, just as far as business growth, but the other way was just as far as like um, my confidence and abilities,
Mm.
for lack of a better word. Yeah, I mean, so that's it in a nutshell. It's like kind of a lifelong thing, but
Yeah.
it took me a long time to really arrive at myself. And when I talk to other people in the field, that's not uncommon. Not uncommon for a
Mm.
lot of different people who eventually start their own thing, or do their own thing generally. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. I haven't so many numerous questions, but I
Mhm.
think the one that I kind of want to start off with is, what is spirit? Like you talked about, you had this connection to spirit, like who or what is that?
It's a great question, and I don't know that I have a complete definitive answer, but I
Mhm.
will tell you what I have. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Great.
um, Spirit basically is entities. Well, there's a few different ways to look at it. One is the entities that are not in our physical plane. Basically not really able to be heard or listened to or smelled or tasted with our five general senses. Um, Spirit works, on just another plane of consciousness. You can look at spirit as ancestors, right? Spirit as our beloved deceased, people around us that whether they're family members, friends, acquaintances. Spirit is also the deities or mythological beings, etc., that we've collectively consciously created in
Mhm.
some way, shape, or form, or that have existed and that we've kind of lost touch with. Um, the other thing about spirit is um, it's also inherent in all living things. You and even non-living things. There's probably I think it's considered the oldest religion in the world is animism,
Mhm.
which is the concept of just everything around you has a spirit. That is basically itself on another plane of
Mhm.
consciousness, and that spirit can be interacted with and talked with. And I think there's this part of us that is like very there's a part of like a human that recognizes that at some level. When you think of like just even kind of like silly things, um, I don't know, sometimes when they're driving and we just talk to our car. Yes, we hear a noise like there's okay, just hold up. We're gonna pull into the gas station. Just hold on, things like that. When we start
Mhm.
talking to like, things that we consider inanimate. There's I think there's this part of us that kind of recognizes that there that spirit does exist in most things. So that's the broad definition of spirit. When I'm when I say I would work with spirit or talk with spirit, what I'm specifically referring to are spirit guides, kind of the spirit, almost a spirit that surrounds um, individual people, different spirits that surround individual people in order to guide them and counsel them on their life's journey and their life's path. A lot of times, some of them are spirits that we may have made, in some way, shape, or form, before before kind of being manifested in physical form, an agreement with, you know. Um, to be, to be counseled by. Another one is a higher version of ourselves, the thing we would consider our soul. Almost like talking to the higher version of ourselves that connects, uh, that has almost no skin in the game as far as like our emotions and our stuff like that, but is more just like wisdom, and it's more just like that, that connection as far as like, okay, you're gonna be okay, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that then when I talk about spirit, that's kind of mostly who I'm talking about. And we all have spirits that pop up every so often around us, sometimes in acute ways to kind of guide us through certain situations or just make themselves known. And then we also have spirit of people that were near and dear to us, and sometimes not near and dear to us, that pop up, from time to time. So
Yeah. I'm curious, like I noticed you used the word I'm communicating with spirit, and you use the singular version of that word versus, I'm communicating with spirits. Is there
Mhm.
a reason for that? Or like even your earlier connection to spirit? I guess when you're saying using that word, is it that you are connecting to that plane where those things kind of exist, or like where there's a level of communication with those things? Is that why you use that singular term versus a um, multiple term? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I use it as a collective.
Mm,
I use spirit as a collective. Spirit. To be frank, it's just more that spirits feels more awkward to say for
sure.
me. It's like connected with spirits. If I'm talking about multiple spirits, it's usually in reference to guides, or like, or whatever kind of like commonality they may have for the person
Mm,
or purpose. But yeah, I mean, it's just yeah, it's more just like, for me, like spirit as
yeah.
a singular. If I look at it, it is almost singular in a way of like, I do look at spirit generally
Hmm.
as, there's a different kind of plane, spirit plane, and tapping into that is feels more singular to me,
Hmm.
as opposed to just tapping into a specific spirit. I don't know if I
Yeah.
explained that well, but we'll
No,
see.
no, that is. I mean, it's a fascinating thing the way that you're describing it. And I'm wondering is what's coming up for me is wondering if it's similar to parts work therapy in a sense, where I can understand both that I, as a human, as Cameron, am
Mhm.
one thing, right? And I can also understand from a different perspective or a point of view that I have within me different competing parts that might be in disagreement, right?
Yeah.
Or like working towards a common goal, but like I've kind of got to resolve like my desire for um, growth against my desire for safety and security, right? And like working with those two different pieces of myself allow me to move forward as a collective one unit, but they are kind of like different angles. And I guess the point that I'm getting to is wondering, when you talk about spirit, do you kind of see it like spirit has, in one sense, a singular point of consciousness, or I don't know, intention, I guess, that has multiple voices speaking to get there, that are these different entities, that they are both kind of one and multiple? Or is it that like spirit, there's like a plane and there are just a bunch of different, entity spirits with different intentions, that don't actually all kind of fit towards a particular point, I guess?
Um, it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So it's like um, there is a collective oneness,
Hmm.
and when I refer to that, I usually just refer to that as source.
Hmm.
We look at that as source, and then from there, there are individual spirits, individual people who are on their soul's journey, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that that we connect to within that. So it's a little bit of both, you know, and you know, I it's you know, there are times when it's not always possible just to tap into a specific spirit. I'll put it that way. Unless you've kind of formed a relationship with them or
Mm-hmm.
an allyship, you know, usually as I kind of put it, um, you know, which is what I have with, I would say, my guides. You know, it's like an alliance. It's like, hey, we're gonna, you know, form an alliance and like work as a team to, you know, do X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, we most people have that around them, you know, just like a team that works with them. The but when I'm talking like, you know, when we're talking like mediumship, you know, when I'm working with someone, they want to contact someone specific or Sarah, um it's, you know, I'm always very clear that, you know, that the like we're gonna try it, there's a chance it might not happen. And you know, it's kind of like picking up a phone and making a phone call, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and finding that, you know, finding a line, and they may not answer, you know, and
Yeah.
it may not be for any specific reason other than, you know, they're either busy kind of doing other things, or, you know, it's just not the right time. And but what will happen usually is someone else will come forward, you know, in relationship to that spirit, and almost connect the dots that way. And they might allow that specific spirit then to come forward as well. Um, you know, so you kind of play, you know, so I'm always very open to who comes forward when I'm working with spirit. Always very open to kind of who's out there. Um,
Yeah.
you know, just because it is, you know, again, going back to kind of the singular versus like, you know, like it is a bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, once you tap into one spirit, it's very easy then for them to give you information about what else is going on, you know, with other, um, you know, with other spirits that you may want to contact directly.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
yeah.
Cool. And I guess I have a number of questions about the spirits. So, like,
Yeah.
if you're ever like you want to, I don't know, change the subject or you want to
That's
like
okay.
move
Go
from
for it.
there.
Like
All
it.
right. Cool. Um. So one of the things you mentioned in that is like this idea of like spirit guides, and there are like multiple spirits around you. Um, do these spirits all, if I'm thinking of them in terms of people, and people have made certain, I don't know, contracts or agreements with these different spirits or whatever, and let's say a soul plane or something of that nature, like before they came to this life or this earth or however someone's seeing it, like, are these spirits, are they, do they ever have competing interests? I guess is my question, right? So if I have four spirit guides, just like I might have four parents, right? Like I might have somebody who's saying like, "Oh, I want you to go and get your PhD," and I want somebody else is like, "Oh, I want you to go and like follow your dreams and travel across the world for 4 years," and somebody else is like, "I want you to just stay here and get married and live locally," right? There's like all of these different kind of competing desires or interests. Um, is that something that like happens, or is there like a more uniform way because they're not necessarily operating the same type of mind that maybe humans do? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, it's a great question, but and generally, no.
Hmm.
You know, if they're working together in part of your spirit team, there's a connection to you that they
Hmm.
have, and you know, your spirit guides are not about kind of dictating what you do or kind of like
Hmm.
pulling you a certain way or another. It's more about just kind of helping you stay on paths that are going to help you get to where you maybe want to in this lifetime, you
Hmm.
know, or maybe either whether it's something that you kind of like agreed to go
Hmm.
before, or just things that serve your higher purpose, you know, and
Yeah.
that can include keeping you out of harm, and it can also include, you know, sometimes having you live like tough experiences because sometimes that gets you to the next place. where that you need to be at. But there's I've never seen any infighting. And the reason for that is like, kind of on that plane, there's a few concepts that we have as humans um, that just don't exist. One is like ego. Our ego makes us very human, and that just isn't there. You um, we A lot of times we ascribe ego to certain spirits, and I'm talking about specific like deities. If you look at different religions and they attach an ego to a deity, oh, you can't do this to I don't know, Hecate or Ganesh or whoever, because they're going to get pissed at you. And then the spirit might take on a little bit of that energy, and say, okay, yeah, that's there. But when we're talking like just our general spirit guides, there's no ego. Same thing that kind of like is there's no concept of beginning or end. So in that plane, so so time to them is very much like it just is. Yeah. I can't, like, that's something that's just even hard to like fathom when I try and like think about it, in kind of my little brain. But yeah, there's no infighting. They're all kind of like supportive in what you as a team and what you have, and I know when I kind of look at my spirit team, a lot of times they kind of have different roles that they play. And a lot of times with other people's, like, some have different roles that they play as well. Some are more companions, and just there for almost like kind of like support and comfort. Some are more for guidance and just kind of like, okay, well, you making sure that you're able to kind of like see what's ahead of you, and stay on there. And some are ancestral and connected to you because of either blood. And some are ancestral and connected to you because of what you're doing on this plane. Like if you're a artist, there may be guys around you that are into that, and like kind of like attracted to that. And not all guides are human. There's a lot of people have animal guides as well. That kind of hover around them. I would say, most people usually have an animal or so, kind of like hanging out with them as well. And then, some people also have, commonly known spirits or deities, or just, kind of, people in that, vein. So,
Yeah. So you kind of have like these three different categories, it sounds like, or four. Like there's kind of, I would say, the general spirit guides, there's like your ancestors, there's the animal guides, and then there's, I would say, deities. We'll call them that, or
yeah.
we'll fit in probably angels or whatever else kind of goes
Yeah,
in there.
deities, angels,
Like,
it kind of, hold on.
yeah. So are, because you mentioned like some of them are not human, so are most of like spirit guides, not most of them, is like that one category of spirit guide. Obviously ancestors, it sounds like they would have had some level of a human experience. Are the other spirit guides, I guess minus the animal or minus the deities, all ones who have also had a human experience? Is that like kind of the general idea?
No, I mean
No. Okay.
they wouldn't have had a human experience. So if we're
Okay.
talking about an animal, a lot of times we're talking about the spirit of the animal, as a collective, and kind of what, sometimes it is a specific animal, but usually it's like within there. Like if a dog, it could be a very specific dog to us, but generally, if we're talking like owl, that's owl
Right.
spirit. That's there, that is attracted to us, and we're attracted to them in a way that like forms this relationship where they're helping us in that way, that owl spirit can, as a guide. And animals generally come about as guides, as ways to help us tap into parts of ourselves that that honestly allow us to kind of like would say, ground ourselves and see ourselves in ways that, take our ego out of it,
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm. Fascinating. Um, you also talked about the connection to ancestors like through blood. And I was just wondering if you can kind of expand on that. Um, Partly because something I've just noticed, interestingly enough, and maybe this has been a more ongoing thing, but there seems to be kind of a rise in, at least in video games and in other forms of storytelling, like kind of say connection to like blood magic, right? This kind of connection to the blood being somehow important, or manipulation of that, but also like connected to ancestry and these other things. And we even talk about like the difference of your family of blood versus like your family of choice. And but there's this redemption of our bloodline even in a lot of like myths and that kind of thing as well. So I was curious if you could just talk about that or expand on that at all.
Yeah, I mean, ancestors, we ancestors, if we kind of trace down bloodlines and we're looking at it in that way, our ancestors go back thousands of years. There's a so, and then that branches out. So we actually have a lot of ancestors typically that are, related to us in some way, shape, or form, with blood, like far beyond what, I don't know, ancestry.com might be able to track, just from what we have. So there's like and a lot of times when we look at our ancestry in that way, there's a collective kind of experience or consciousness that forms around our ancestry, based on kind of what they might have gone through, based on kind of what might have been passed down from generation to generation. And sometimes that's wisdom. Well, a lot of times that's wisdom. That's also all their suffering, all the trauma that may have been passed on. It's also all the healing that's been passed on and the lessons that come through. So we have access to that within us. Um, when we're looking at, even beyond spirit, when we're looking at kind of what they're studying with epigenetics, um, right now, and kind of how, great grandmother's experience with famine may, may trigger our anxiety today. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they're looking at that as being, not necessarily part of our DNA, but something that, I forget what it is exactly. It's like proteins or something that may be kind of activated, like
Mm-hmm.
by DNA. A little bit beyond my kind of like scientific knowledge there.
Yeah.
But there's studies into that, and it's like, why do we have that, and why is that
Mm-hmm.
happening, and why we see that. So there is a lot of power in, um, in our blood and what it represents,
Yeah.
so to say. You're talking about kind of blood magic and stuff. When you look at, witchcraft, it's like, not a witch, but know some things about it. But one of the most powerful tools that over thousands of years have been used in witchcraft is, menstrual fluid,
Mm-hmm.
or the blood. In fact, many traditions had, like, when the women, were going through their periods, they would sequester them, because that's when their power grew, the strongest, in according to those traditions and stuff. And it's
Wow.
different traditions, that there was. So there's always been this connection to blood and magic and power.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as far as ancestry is concerned, and as far as spirit's concerned, when we die, our body, in some way, shape, or form, our body gets returned to the earth.
Sure.
Right. Whether that's in ash form, or buried, or thrown into the ocean, or whatnot. We then collectively, over the course of millennia,
Mm-hmm.
have this connection to the earth that also connects us to our ancestors. So when we talk about things like grounding. Probably heard the term grounding, where you're like, whether it's physical grounding, you walk with your, bare feet out in the grass or something like that. And we talk about, or energetic grounding, where we drop our energy into the earth and, I remain there. We're really grounding to Earth's energy and our ancestral energy there. And we pull up that kind of ancestral energy there. So I always think of ancestors as being more connected to the earth, and our blood also returning to the earth in some way, shape, or form. Once we're done with, our physical body, once we die. But blood has always been a very, very powerful, just a powerful symbol, powerful. I don't want to call it a tool, but there is a lot of blood magic. There have been plenty of cultures that practice some way, shape, or form of blood magic, or kind of respect that power of blood within there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, thank you. That's fascinating. One of the questions that I'm sure that you, in some way, shape, or form, get often and probably wrestle with yourself is like, how do you know whether or not this is all bullshit, for lack of a better word, right? Like, how have you been able to be like, oh, this is real, this is true for you? Because there's a lot of people who, have maybe either taken advantage of other people through the facade of psychic medium. They are kind of maybe lost in their own sauce about it, or they're, I don't know. There's so many different things that go on, right? It's a huge area where people have major doubts or major trust issues, and there's some people who will pay anybody who's a psychic medium out there and listen to anyone do anything. And I can hear some people talk, and it's just like throwing out 50 different angels and tarot cards and all of these different things, and there doesn't seem to be a coherent, unified sort of anything from them. That it feels very I don't know, there can be like a lot of like narcissism even caught up in some of that stuff. So I'm curious, like, how have you found whatever it is that you need to believe that this is true for yourself?
It's a great question, and yeah, it is. It's a fairly common one, but it's also, there's a few layers to that, because I definitely I want to address what you talked about with other people, like with a lot less integrity, just taking advantage of that. But for myself, to be absolutely, honest, there was a big period of my life where I just wasn't sure about anything with this. Is this, is this just like, me living fantasy? Am I in bullshit? And that was a big part of me not doing anything with this for a long time, and just being very kind of like conscious of that. I knew I wasn't bullshitting when I was like 5 or 7, because you're just kind of like, I didn't know anything about this. It's just like, nope, I'm talking to that man right now. It's like he's right there, and he's telling me about some very specific things. We're a lot more open when we're kids. But as I got, I would say in recent years, let's say, there's too much for me. The connection's too strong, and there's too much actual evidence for me that comes up for either things that happen in my life, messages I get, or specifics that I work with people, or just even in actual ways that information comes through, because information comes through in all different ways, where actually hearing it you know happens as well. So I there is a notion of having to trust it, and there is a notion of saying like, okay, well, this is that, this is what that is, and I'm going to trust this right now, because it's you kind of have to trust yourself in that process. It's like if you're experiencing something and you're going through it and you're saying, hey, that's bullshit, then you're also not trusting yourself,
Hmm.
In that process and in that experience. And if that experience keeps happening over and over and over again, and you keep getting there, at some point you say, okay, well, what happens if I just kind of give myself over to it, trust it, and see where it takes me? And then it's just kind of like, undeniable.
Yeah.
So, at this point in time, like, it's undeniable for me, but I had to, a lot of the, I had to remove a lot of the conditioning for, that was around me, through other people, through working, through family and society and whatnot, in order to be like, okay, well, this is who I am. This is what this is. And it's not bullshit. And, in a very real way, when I work with other people, I do readings for other people. I can be very specific about certain things, that comes up where it's like, okay, yeah, that's what that is, because I'm not thinking about things. It's just like the information is coming through. So, but it's also a common, I've talked to other mediums, person here who have been like, yeah, sometimes who said, sometimes I'm just like wondering, am I crazy? Is something happening here? Like, I don't know, it's like that. And it's like, well, just put yourself in it and give yourself over to it and see, you'll know if you're crazy or not. But, it depends on kind of depends on, what the information is that you're getting, what the information is that you're kind of putting out there. And then also realizing that you live in the real world.
Yeah.
And, grounding yourself in that, and balancing that out.
Yeah. How do you personally do that? Because I think something that is definitely unique with you compared to what I've seen with at least certain other people is like you have a very grounded presence. You have lived a both very worldly life, if you will, and you have this connection, right? But that with you, I never experience any sense of like a mania, for example, right? That I can experience from a lot of people who at least are claiming a level of spirituality or whatever's going on for them, and maybe it's just how it's manifesting for them in that moment or whatever. But it's something I really notice with you is there is a centeredness and a a deeper connection of groundedness and intellect that's like brought into all of this stuff compared to a lot of people who may or may not be spiritual but seem to be manic, I guess is the right word for it, but kind of almost lost in that spirit realm, I guess. If you're going to use kind of that language a bit more, like they're where it's almost overtaking them or confusing them, where they're seeing every single thing as a sign or symbol that is creating more of a disorientation versus a way to actually align to something meaningfully.
Yeah. No, well, first of all, thank you. And then,
Yeah.
but then it's also like yeah, I know there's a lot of different permutations of, kind of the woo people,
Sure.
out there, that, and how they kind of, live in this world. For me, it's pretty simple. It's like, one is, I am a spiritual being living on this fucking planet. It's like, and no matter what, the goal is not for me to like be in spirit world all the time, to be, to ascend my soul or whatnot. That because it's very simple and easy to do that. You just die. Okay. If that's, if that's your goal, there's a solution, right? So my job really is to live in this world and to deal with all of the things that happen in this world, and to deal with myself in this world with all the fucking imperfections and with all the good parts and all the bullshit that I am, as a person, whether that's, for me, from other people or whatnot. And then, and to exist in relationships, to exist in, in relationships with other people, with my children, with, and just with manifesting and bringing to life the things that I want to see in this world.
Hmm.
That's it. Like, and that's the way I look at myself, and that's the way I look at kind of like my life.
Hmm.
I'm fortunate in that I left, because I strongly believe everyone um, is psychic to a point,
Hmm.
and can develop, this, and keep developing it. And not necessarily that everyone can do mediumship very easily. It's a little different, but um, I'm fortunate that I left part of that open. And I'm fortunate that I
Hmm.
met people along the way that were really good mentors that helped me keep that open while remaining grounded.
Hmm.
Because the mentors I've had as well, you wouldn't know that they were, professional psychics at
Hmm.
all if you just kind of walked into that,
Yeah.
at all. Um, but they are,
Hmm.
so yeah, it's just, I think the thing to remember is like, spiritualism in any way, shape, or form is not. I think a lot of people use it as escapism, right? And trying to escape like this physical world that
Hmm.
we're in, without realizing like the two actually work really well together,
Hmm.
and that we exist in both at this time. You know, we can have signs and symbols from spirit that come our way, right? Um, and we can look for them. But if we're always trying to read for the meaning in anything, we never get to apply the fucking meaning,
Hmm.
right? And we never get to be in that meaning, and we never get to actually move things forward. So, some things have meaning, some things don't. The if you don't practice like, the ability to discern what is what, and even in the things that have meaning, like sometimes, okay, that has meaning, great. And now
Hmm.
what? So
Hmm.
I don't know. It's for me, and I'm very like, I think I'm able to kind of be that balance now because I went through such a long period where I was so much more on the physical kind of like, you know, grind, I would say, um, you know, in that world,
Hmm.
when and seeing like, oh, okay, well, this is how releasing more of that part of myself actually adds to my life instead of like escaping to this. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I think that the escapism aspect is a part that I've seen. I mean, we see it with a lot of people, even who are not spiritual, but even, especially with, I think, a lot of spiritually minded people that I have run into, there's a sense of like so desperately wanting to transcend or leave this world where I think my own connection to any sort of like spirituality for me has always been like about being here. Like I think even in like a lot of tantra or other forms of spirituality, a lot of the idea is that we're not like this is the short period of time relative to the eternity of spirit world or whatever that is. Right, it's like this is kind of the that's tiny speck that we actually get to experience. That there's like actually a really cool gift in being here and being
Yeah.
alive and being human. And whether it's like we're here for lessons or whether we're here just to experience or whatever the deal is, like there's something about being here and there's a reason that you're here. And to honor and acknowledge and like I think accept that and integrate that seems like a much healthier approach towards life than simply trying to run away from it for some reason.
Yeah, and you know what? The reasons we're here a lot of times, like, it's like they're not always grandiose. Kind of talking from a
Hmm.
spirit perspective, it's like sometimes it's very much like we just decide, and this is stuff I've gotten from my guides and just kind of like
Hmm.
been there. Sometimes it's just about, like really want to experience the physical sensations of being human,
Mm.
um, like tasting ice cream, it's like, or just
Yeah.
other things in in that vein, like feeling touch, and just doing all of these different things that kind of like come about from that. So
Mm.
it's sometimes it's like, okay, well, we that's like the draw for us as spirit to be here, um, and we also get to experience things like time. We get to experience like these relationships that we have with other people in this way where we see them go through
Mm.
um, these challenges and grow old together, or see people go through these changes, and those are all fucking gifts. Like
Mm.
those are things that we can do that spirit can't. you
Mm.
know it's like, and I know sometimes it feels very hard here, um, but we just like grounding ourselves more into being here on earth, being human, is a spiritual act.
Mm.
That's what it is. So there's always that kind of like cognizance and togetherness with that. So yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that sentiment too, like of I think letting go of the grandiosity, if you will, because I think often even when people talk about like why am I here, it's like I'm here to like reset all my generational trauma, or I'm here to do this thing. Like there's always I've anybody time I've heard anybody's like purpose on being alive or from stuff is like very it is very grandiose in some way, shape, or form, right? And I think our current generation, we think a lot about purpose. We think a lot about what's my passion, what am I here to do, what's the impact I'm here to make. We have these kind of like larger vision type things, and I think it's a really beautiful sentiment to be reminded of. We can be here simply to experience, and the image that comes up into my mind is the story of Siddhartha, of Buddha, right, where it's like he went to go figure out how to uh, achieve enlightenment and goes sits under a tree and sits there forever and fasts and like goes through all these things and like still never achieves it and finally gives up, and then somebody offers him like some rice pudding. He's like, F it, I'm just gonna break my fast and like have the rice pudding. And it's like in having the rice pudding he achieves enlightenment,
Yeah.
right? And it's this beautiful dance and story that I found with my own like spiritual journey through meditation and the other various things that I've done along that track, where a lot of the interesting thing is that like when we've had like a peak experience or an enlightening experience, or we've had these things that have happened to us, right, we what happens then is we're like, oh, I want to like cling to that, I want to try to get it, where it's like the trying and the clinging is actually the thing that's keeping that thing away, right? It's like often when I've coached people, even a lot of times after they've gone through like a meditative experience or had a very profound, kind of the experiencing of serenity or inner peace, a lot of the coaching I end up giving to people is like learning to allow yourself to simply like be angry, or be angry at yourself for being angry if that's like where you're at, because it's like being where you actually are is actually how you get present. Like you can't try to be present by fighting with whatever you're actually doing, because whatever you're actually doing is what presence is, right? So it's this very it's tricky sometimes to understand, but I think for people who experience it, and I think people like yourself, you kind of I think understand what I'm getting at.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and you brought up a lot of things like right there. So one is like, yes, I mean, I've read for people, and it's there where I'm like, oh, you actually are like kind of this person who, not that you heal generational trauma, but you help heal ancestral
Hmm.
trauma. But guess what? The way you fucking do that is by just living your life.
Hmm.
There's no like thing where you have to go and like actually, I don't know, like how else would you do it?
Hmm.
You know, it's like you
Yeah.
go and live your life, with sometimes with the recognition of your ancestors, and maybe just like setting up like something where you work with them, and acknowledge them. Um, and sometimes it's in letting go of that heavy trauma
Hmm.
that you have. You know, I've yeah. Uh, no, I don't want to give away specific readings, so
Yeah, no, no.
just there. But I was about to give examples. I'm like, no, no. Uh, the other the other thing you brought up, I love the Buddha, you know, anecdote that you said, because I had so when I was about 23, I think I did a 40-day fast. No one fucking asked me to do a 40-day fast. There was no like thing about this or anything. This is before intermittent fasting or anything like that was a thing, right?
I was about to
Yeah,
say.
we're talking like 2000. I don't know, age myself here. 2000 and like two, maybe 2002, 2003. And so I did a 40-day fast, and the 40-day fast was absolutely no food. Could drink water, and I would make a vegetable broth with no solids, and I would drink that twice a day. And then I took like a liquid vitamin C, and a liquid mineral supplement, but liquid. So nothing solid at all. So no smoothies, no shakes. It wasn't that. 40 days, just that.
Mhm.
Um, and the thing I noticed was just how sharpened my senses were after a bit. Like the smell of just rice was amazing, and those things, and that my realization. I didn't do this for any like big fucking spiritual reason or physical reason. I literally just said, I'm going to try and do this. It's
Mhm.
like, and so, but the thing I noticed was like just how heightened my senses were. And it wasn't that I wanted to live in that way all the time. It was just more like, oh, my senses could probably be this heightened most of the time if I like just kind of like appreciated the things more
Mhm.
I was doing. If I appreciated that rice more, it might just smell amazing to me all the time.
Mhm.
I'm just noticing it
Yeah.
right now because I'm like, wow, I haven't eaten anything. It's like,
Yeah.
so it's like, um, so that was like a big lesson for me, my own, like, I guess, mini enlightenment, you know.
Yeah. No, I think it's a beautiful perspective on it because normally when I hear what I heard from that, like I think a lot of times people explain their fasting, and I've done various fasting things, mostly like short term. I think the longest water fast for all I had as water was 3 days. Um, although I've also given up, yeah, like basically food for 21 days with a different thing that I did one time. But you talked about like the heightened sensory experience, right? Of like, oh, now I'm smelling this rice in a completely different way, and then the shift to greater appreciation once you have food again. And I thought it was fascinating because so often when I hear with people who go on like long term fasts or other types of spiritual journey, it's the absence that is like creating the spiritualness, and so there's a desire to go back to that fasting experience to kind of keep recreating that experience or keep redoing it. And I have never heard before somebody saying like that the actual lesson is simply to, once you have food again, to keep appreciating it, right? To keep that same state going versus almost turning fasting or these other things, these other spiritual tools or gifts or practices into a new form of attachment.
Yeah. No, it's like, yeah, no, I don't understand, like, going constantly chasing spirituality. Like, it's just there. It is present. It's right there. So I teach. I have people and clients who I teach. Um, who I teach how to develop their psychic abilities. One with mediumship. Is it that? And it's like one of the first things, like the most valuable things that anyone can practice, but especially with that is mindfulness, and it's mindfulness in the way of really, really being mindful of yourself and what you are experiencing at that time. In that moment of time, living in that present moment, as hokey as it sounds, is really kind of what that's about. You know, and that is, in a nutshell, a core component of spirituality, and you know, developing access to spirit, because that appreciation for the things around us while we're in, you know, our so-called mundane world, um, that is exactly what spirituality is. That's exactly what connection to spirit is. You know, it's and yeah. So I mean, yeah. So it's like going around and like, I have no fucking desire to do another 40-day fast. I don't want to do another 5-day fast. I remember after that, I was like, oh, maybe I'll try another 20-day one, you know, and stuff. Like, you know, and I remember starting and being like, oh, this kind of sucks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna go, yeah, you know, I had nothing. And to me, that was like, oh, well, I have nothing more to learn from this. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, there you go. So I'm not going to push myself to go do that, you
Yeah.
know. You know, and sometimes I think, you know, like there is like, people do benefit from like a short period of like being completely out of their common environment, and like, you know,
Yeah.
whether it's isolating or whatnot, just to kind of like discover themselves. But the discovery is really about yourself. And then, since that discovery is about yourself, you should be able to bring that back wherever you are, unless you're leaving yourself somewhere else and, you know, you're splitting yourself in two, which is, tell me how you do that. That's awesome. But you
Yeah.
know, but it's like, but you know, it really is about connecting with yourself and
Yeah.
rediscovering yourself. So you know, when people are going on these spiritual journeys and stuff, if they're not reforming their relationship to themselves in that time, same thing with plant medicine, right? Um, if you're not reforming that relationship to yourself after you go through a mushroom journey, you know, or something like that, and taking the opportunity to do that, then going back and doing it again, whether it's a mushroom journey, a retreat, you know, a fast, or, you know, going up to the mountains in Nepal, or whatever you like to do, going back and doing it again is not going to change anything. You know, you're just working in cycles then. You know, you got to be able to bring that back to apply to your everyday life, because it's you that is really carrying all of that. That it's you that has to change. It's you that has to reform the relationship to yourself. So you got to do that fucking work, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. No, and it sounds like what I'm kind of hearing in all this is how, whether it's a meditation retreat or going to the Himalayas or taking a psychedelic experience or going to a rave or a festival, like there are a lot of what's happening there is that you're reconnecting with yourself in a very like direct way, right? And then you come back to, let's call it reality, if you will, like the non-temporal space, right? This is like everyday life thing,
yeah,
where like there is the opportunity to actually integrate and put these things into practice. And if all you're ever doing is basically turning into, let's call it your self signal, then you might be getting really good at like listening to that, but like you're never actually taking in and applying the lessons because all you're doing is basically listening to a cell phone recording, if you will.
yeah, yeah. Just, you're setting yourself up just not to be happy. You know,
Mm.
it's like, and if you come back, you know, if you come back and keep doing these things, and, you know, maybe that's also then just a signal that maybe your everyday life needs to change some, in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's moving to a different place, reforming relationships, or whatnot, just something needs to change, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, um, in order to get that. But really, the core of it is the relationship that you have with yourself and what that does. And that, whether that's, you know, and I see that in kind of spirituality, I see that in plant medicine, you know, clients I work with on kind of like both sides, and a lot of times that combines.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it really is at its core, yeah, again, just reforming that relationship to yourself, so you become, you know, or become who you want to be, or realize, better yet, that you already are that person and you just got to make some tweaks,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that that's spot on. I'm curious I know that you help people do this. So when people are coming back from whether it's some form of spiritual experience, I'll just kind of use that as a blanket term, whether it's psychedelic or whether it's a 10-day silent retreat or whether it's a 40-day fast, and they're coming back to this world to hopefully integrate those things. What are some of the things that you help people use or have used for yourself to keep that connection strong while being in a place where we have a lot more input signals and things that we are needing to shift or change in our life?
Yeah, that's a great question too. It's a little bit, well, I'll tell you what I do. It's like,
Sure.
and then see if it applies. What's helped me is having a short daily practice of, um, meditation of sorts, um, but really about a energetic connection, for me, where I just make sure I'm kind of looking at my energy field, I cleanse it, and then I connect to the earth, I connect up, and I kind of form a circuit between the two within myself. Um, that helps me having that daily practice. I do it before I start work. Basically, in the day, I don't wake up at 5 in the morning and meditate for 2 hours. Some shit. This
Mhm.
this can take 5 minutes. This can take 2 minutes.
Mhm.
Or sometimes I indulge and have it take an hour if I don't have much to do because I like to, you know, it's nice. Um,
Mhm.
so I recommend for everyone to kind of develop some kind of practice that centers them and grounds them, like, and do that daily, and the thing I would encourage is have it be a practice that can last you your lifetime. Because a lot of people, a lot of people are like, well, I just go out and work out, and I just go out and, like, do, I don't know, run, something like that. Like, at some point, you're not going to be able to do that, whether
Mhm.
it's due to an injury or due to just, I don't know, like being too old, or
Mhm.
something happening. So
Mhm.
have it be something where, all you need to do is just be yourself, or be with
Mhm.
yourself. So that can look like meditation. It can look like journaling. It can look like something, but it's just something that gets you connected to your present moment and mindful of that. That to me is the cornerstone of any integration practice.
Mhm.
You know, Everything
Yeah.
else is just complementary,
Hmm.
at that point.
Is there a specific grounding practice or like that short ritual meditative experience that you particularly use that you like?
Yeah. Um, Let me see. I'm just trying to clear. I have a lot of things that I do that are more specifically related to my work. So
Sure.
I'm just gonna take those out of it because it's like that's too much for a lot of people. It's like don't need to do all that. The simplest thing. We'll go one more step actually. So I'm talking to myself. But so as far as grounding is concerned, um, the simplest thing is just to sit, be quiet, in a quiet space, eyes closed, and picture first, a ball of light above you, or disc of light, just white light, and picture it just going through you and over you and cleansing anything that is there. Any kind of like emotions, thoughts, energy that's out there that is kind of like clung itself to you that you're generating or whatnot. Just let it cleanse right there. And then from yourself, as you kind of like trace yourself from the top of your head, just send a line of light, like a white light, almost like a cord, down from the top of your head, going down your spine, down through the earth, and connecting to the center of the earth. All right. And it helps to actually visualize that if you can. however you want to visualize it. If you want to visualize it, almost like zoomed out and you're seeing like this little dot of white light, like going through like the center of the earth and connected to the center of the earth there. Awesome. If you more visualize it from, first person point of view, like an FPS, and you're kind of like, you are basically the white light that's kind of going down and connecting to the center of the earth. Awesome. Then keep it there, and that's grounding, and then the step that, because I think it's pretty common to kind of like, drop light into the earth, or hear that in a lot of circles. But the step a lot of people miss is then draw energy from that. Like pull, keep your light there, but look at it as a connection that you're not just grounding and sending energy there, but that energy that you're coming back, there's energy coming back up at you from the center of the earth and filling you up, and you're able to draw energy from the earth in that way. So it's almost like you kind of like have this circuit going there around you. And then I would take that one step further, if people are open to it, and visualize, it's a few different ways to visualize this, but you can either visualize that same light like now coming up and going up into the cosmos, and again, visualize that, go through the atmosphere. Some people like to visualize it as a tree almost growing out of them, whatever floats your boat. It's like, so, but go straight up into the cosmos, and then the same thing, connect there, just like connect into the ether up there, and then draw that down. And then you have then this circuit coming from the earth, coming from the cosmos, where you are the center of that circuit, and you're drawing this energy like up and down. It takes a little bit of practice, but after a bit, you're able to kind of do that pretty quick, and then you feel very, like, I don't know, it's like you almost feel that connection after a bit. For me, I feel it very strongly when I do that. It's like I actually feel that energy coming in and out. But if you're just starting from scratch, like, I don't know, some people don't right off the bat, but it's like building up that skill and just that sensitivity to energy that comes up. It's also something that I like to use with like people who consider themselves empaths, where an empath, just for me, just being the catch-all term for people who say, oh, whenever I go into a room, too many people, I get tired, and etc. It's like, well, stop generating your own energy all the time. Draw it from the earth, draw it down from the cosmos. You can do one or the other, ideally both, and see how that works for you. So that way you're not depleting your own energy all the time. It's one way that that's like the base way of when I work, when I have back-to-back clients for readings and stuff. That's how, people ask if I get tired, and it's like, no, I don't. Like, I actually feel more energized because I've learned not to use my own energy all the time for this. There's other things I do, but that's the basis of it for grounding. And and that's the way I like to ground.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. No, really cool. I love that explanation and that experience, and also like a different level of advice that I've heard for empaths or people who walk into the room feeling tired kind of thing, where usually what I hear is some level of like, learning to put on armor or learning to not connect so much or whatever it is. And you're the first person I've ever heard express it from a place of like, actually just like get your energy up more. So maybe you're still kind of tuning into your gifts or connected or whatever, but like you're able to provide for yourself in a more energetically intensive space.
Yeah, you want to be able, draw the energy. You don't just self-generate it. And I do forms of shielding as well, right? But that's more just for my work. It's like when you work with different people, just different stuff, you don't want kind of the influence of that a lot, like coming in your way. For me, it's just a way of staying. It's almost like I don't know, keeping like if I were a surgeon or something, just keeping like the operating room clean. It's like,
Mm.
so making sure that, you got to scrub in before you come in here. That's my shield. It's like, for empaths and stuff, yeah, again, I think the opposite of what people might think, which is make your energy big. I recommend this from anyone. Like, some people, if you don't want to be noticed, like some people like think, okay, make myself smaller and stuff. Like, make yourself bigger, make your
Mm.
energy huge. Just visualize your energy, throw it out throughout the whole room. Like,
Mm.
have touch everything in there with it, because that is just your, you know you can look at it as your affirmation of like, no, I'm in this room right now, I'm in this space, I'm in this, I don't know, concert or field or wherever, and I'm able to work with everything that's here.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, make yourself big. um yeah, I learned that a long time ago, and it was very, yeah, very, uh for me it was, honestly, life changing, just because,
Mm.
I was someone who was just really tired a lot, around other
Yeah.
people. And not that that doesn't happen every so often, but not near what used to be. So yeah.
Yeah. In your own spiritual journey, you talked about having this really strong connection when you were younger.
Hmm.
A lot of people, a lot of younger kids do, whether it's an imaginary friend that maybe is not actually imaginary, again from kind of different people's perspectives or whatnot, or there's different connections, and a lot of people have that story, at least, right, where there's like a when they're younger they maybe have these connections and they either lose them or they stay connected or they reopen them later on in their life. It sounds like you, for one, kind of always, you said, kept an open door to them. And I'm also wondering, when you were going through that journey, actually, let me back up a little bit. When you were first having those initial experiences with spirit, like what was it that you were like actually experiencing? I know you mentioned like, oh, I'm like seeing a person or talking to a person. Are you physically seeing and hearing them? Is it more of like a mind's eye kind of thing? Like, what is the experience you're having when you were young and having these experiences?
Yeah, so I'll get into specifics. Like, I was giving like the whole general, so I
No,
sort of
no, for sure.
glossed over all of
No,
it.
it's a
But
great
yeah,
overview for
that's
sure.
it. So I'll tell you what. So let's see. So my parents are from India. We moved. I was born in London, and so, but the age of 3, we moved to Saudi Arabia. My dad got a job there, so I lived in Saudi Arabia basically from the age of 3 till 13.
Hmm.
Um, Now, when I was, and I have trouble placing the exact age, but I want to say it was like 5 or 6. It's one of those two, for sure. We lived in this house in Saudi Arabia, a villa, and the water in Saudi Arabia at that time, it's the 80s. I don't know what it's like now. You don't want to drink the tap water, right? So it's like, everyone had water coolers, usually in their kitchen or whatnot, where, you have these big bottles you would put in, like kind you see in offices,
Yep.
and you fill the glass. At night, I would get thirsty and I'd want water, but I would be really scared to go down the stairs. Um, One is, my parents had this statue, this wooden carving. It was like about a foot tall, of a bishop, and it was just like, almost like this bishop had this elongated neck and just this carved wooden face, like it was like this, yeah, and it was positioned in a way that it would just stare at whoever would come down the stairs. And I could, like, it sounds silly, but I was not only scared of the statue, but I was scared of something that was like around that statue. And I couldn't quite place my finger on it. It wasn't something that I could see, but it was like, it was a genuine fear. Like, it wasn't, I could ignore like everything else. And during the day, I was okay with that statue. I would look at it sometimes, but at night, there was something there, you know. And I remember just like, just sometimes just being really thirsty and deciding to stay in my bed, or sometimes I would just run down as quick as I could and, go back up. Um, yeah, and I pinpoint that just because that was, when I think back to it, that I think is my first recognition of energy within a space. Because I don't think that the energy in the statue had anything to do with it. The statue was just what I was focused on, but I was picking up on the energy of the house because the house did not feel good. We ended up moving like, you know, right before I turned 7, around there anyway, to another place. And when I was 7, yeah, something happened to me around that time. It was fairly traumatic. No need to go into the details. Shortly after that, though, I started seeing an old man in my room. Very distinct. This was not like, just an idea of someone. It was just like an old man would appear in my room and just, it was kind of like dressed in white, almost like, yeah, almost like old school, like toga or like priestly garb, except not Western. It's like, yeah, just dressed in white and big beard, like an old man, and he was just very comforting. And I identified himself to me as an old relative, and I don't know exactly who, even to this day. Well, actually, sorry, I do. I do know, but that's something that I have to kind of keep to myself.
Sure.
But he identified himself to me as a relative and an old friend. I mean, like an old, couple 1,000-year-old friend. And we would just talk at night, and he would just, like, he was there to, be of comfort and
this is someone you can like physically see and hear at this
someone
point.
I can.
This is not just an energy or a sense or something.
Yeah, this was something that I could physically see. Now here, it was more just hearings. Clairaudience, as I call it, is not as common as people think. It's more just you hear more in your head, and it's very distinct from your thoughts, right? When you hear, I have physically heard like spirit before, and it sounds like staticky words, and it's always short bursts, right? But this communication was very much a thought form communication. And shortly after he arrived, 2 like women arrived as well that were like companions to him, but they were armored. Like they carried spears, shields, and them, I never quite got their identities. He, I know exactly who he is. And they were all, it was kind of like this council that we had. And we would talk, and we would talk about, life. I mean, as a 7-8-year-old, things like, and it's like, yeah, we were just talking about life, and we talk about like things that might be going on with like my family, and I would have information sometimes for like my mom, like about her parents or something, and so yeah, so we but they were more there in kind of this comfort sense.
So you would chat with them. You said kind of about life. You might get information like when you're saying, I guess, life and you're talking to this person. Is it literally like I went to school today? Here's what I did, and that kind of thing? Or is it more like
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I wasn't like that talkative with my parents, to be honest. It's like it was more talkative with them. It's like, yeah, just about, yeah, just, it's just But then also just like learning and talking about different things. It's like just to the best of they would talk to me about different civilizations, and I'm not talking about made up civilizations or something. I'm talking about just different times, historical times, and I'm Zoroastrian, so which you have to be born Zoroastrian. Zoroastrian is an ancient monotheistic religion, but it originated um, in Central Asia, in what became the Persian Empire, essentially around eh, around 1700 BCE. Um, and so that's kind of my ancestry. That's my ancestry. That's my lineage. And you have to be blood in order to in this day and age, in order to still be considered a Zoroastrian. That's kind of where they're from. They would tell me all about that. Tell me about that, those times, this lineage. So I felt very connected to, I felt very connected to that stuff, and also at a very early age formed kind of my opinions of religion, which were also very colored by just where I lived. I lived in a fundamentalist Islamic country, which restricted your kind of restricted a lot of your freedoms, and there wasn't a lot to do over there. And then we go to India, and there would be a lot more stuff going on, predominantly Hindu, but then we see a lot of Christians and, just a lot of different people. And then I went to an American school, even in Saudi Arabia, where just a lot of different people, are around. But just these conversations that I would have, I remember just very much influenced how I looked at religion generally, how I looked at culture, and just kind of looked at the whether heritage is really important or not. The TLDR is not really, it's like so there was a lot of, I don't know, it was like education, in that kind of life. Yeah.
Is there anything that you could share that you remember from those conversations about what you learned about your history or your heritage or Zoroastrianism or whatever that might be? Like, was there anything that you still remember today from those conversations?
Yeah. Well, that old man is still one of my guides. And let me pick one. Yeah, I mean, I think so yeah, I'll pick the big one. Religion was a mistake. Like, religion was never really intended to take the form that it has today. It was always religion at its base form, before it became kind of very, I would say, like, change to human will, as far as like, oh, we want rules in place for, people to follow and do this so that, certain people remain in power and whatnot. Was more of just a connection to universal consciousness. And that was the original intent of, of what became religion. So what I learned very early is like the intention was never for kind of those early forms of that to become a religion. It was always meant to be a recognition of universal consciousness and a recognition of our connection to the earth, our connection to spirit. So, and more of our connection, and more of our connection to each other and being one. So that was some heady stuff, at a young age.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. And I kind of summarize it as religion was a mistake, but it was, and again, what I mean by that is just we took that as humans and decided to carve out like our own parts and pieces
Mm.
and put rules and stuff, and you know, make formalize things
Yeah.
as we do. So yeah.
Yeah. When you say like religion was a mistake, was there a sense from, I don't know, the spirit guide that like it was sort of like a gift from spirit, if you will, and then like it was like, oh shoot, that did not go as they intended, or like when I'm curious about that language, I guess, particularly as a mistake, and even the idea of like humans co-opting it. Was there like, from what you were taught, was there like a level of where that was introduced by something that was non-human, I guess, or yeah, I think you get where
Well,
my question is,
it's
but
just
yeah.
no. Well, it's almost like as we've. Uh, it was very much more of like as we evolved our own doctrines and our own
Hmm.
ways of doing things, we lost that original connection
Hmm.
to, universal consciousness, which
Hmm.
is what, when we, as humans started giving things, you know, names, etc., and kind of like, just recognizing things like the directions and, the sun, the moon, and, kind of nature around us, the cosmos, etc. Um, we started to lose. It wasn't like some spirit came down and then gave this to a human. It was just like we were more connected to it. We
Hmm.
had more access. It was just more open for us.
Hmm.
We started to close that down for ourselves as we started formalizing doctrines and creating things and putting things on a savior and putting things on, you know uh, you have to live life in this way,
Right.
when really the original, the basis of living life, as I was taught, um, by my guides, was to just have, just have good thoughts, you know think good thoughts, um, and carry out those good thoughts with good actions.
Hmm.
And that's it. you know
Yeah. Beautiful. Um, when you were on your personal journey,
Mhm.
you talked about going into the corporate world, and then there was a sense of tuning more into this. But I was wondering, like throughout that whole journey, were you always keeping this deeper connection to spirit on some level, or was there a point where that kind of got cut off for you in one way, shape, or form? Like, and if so, how did you reconnect afterwards? If you did get that separation?
Yeah. So in the beginning, yeah, very much so. I was keeping that connection very strong. Um, Again, it wasn't that I was doing readings. It wasn't that I was kind of, it was just more, that was my personal practice. It was like just who I was. And I was more open about talking about it with people as well. You know what? And I think, what kind of like shut me down more, and kind of shut down that connection more, was just, hey, if I'm doing all these practices, why am I stuck doing all these things that I don't want to do?
Hmm.
And I kept putting that outside of myself.
Hmm.
You know, um, I didn't want to be in the corporate world. I worked at great companies, but I didn't want to be doing these
Hmm.
things, and I felt very trapped. Um, so there was this combination of that, and then this combination of like, hey, there's a lot of like, in order to kind of exist in that world, there are parts of yourself you kind of got to shut down,
Hmm.
to a point. For some people it's sexuality, for some
Hmm.
people it's spirituality,
Hmm.
it's there's a whole gamut of things that, a lot of times just don't bring into, your day to day work life.
Yeah.
And when that, ends up becoming just something that you've done for so long,
Yeah.
You really do feel shut down in that way,
Yeah.
or at least I did. And what, um, I would say over the course of time, I mean, I still stayed, really good friends with like my friends who were in this world, and mentors, etc. Um, but I forgot that I kind of forgot that I was like almost one of them. It's like
Mm.
it's just like more just relied on them for like, advice in that realm or whatnot.
Yeah. Huh.
And what got me back into it was just as I kind of said, like we moved out to California because we were having twins, and we felt like we just wanted to try and live somewhere else. Not that we don't love New York, but it was just like, hey, let's try and live somewhere else. That because we would have had to move anyway. Um, when I got laid off, right when the COVID started, pandemic started, right before lockdown, basically, right around that time. So when I got laid off, um, I had, I don't know, I just felt more myself as I just spent time with my kids. And I started to just realize all these patterns and cycles that really I'd put myself in, and disconnected myself from being myself. Um, and, I got into like this business partnership that, didn't really work out. But during that time, I used that time to really um, connect first back to plant medicine,
Mm-hmm.
with herbalism, and then studying um, kind of the more clinical uses of psychedelics, and how they're being used today. So I took some courses in that, and I just kind of, studied that as well. Um, and the like, you know, all this, just to backtrack a bit. So during that time, like that time of, I would say the last 10 years before that, 10 to 15 years before that, I just felt very disconnected from spirit. Almost felt abandoned.
Hmm.
You um, Stuff started coming back. You know, uh, in just kind of like little spurts here
Hmm.
and there.
What kinds of
Um,
things were coming back? Like when you're saying that they're coming back, what are some like the specific things that you were starting to
I started hearing
experience
my
or see?
guides again.
Hmm.
In the same way, like in guiding me on certain
Hmm.
things. You know, they were the ones who actually were very much like, you got to work with mushrooms.
Hmm.
It's from out of nowhere. Like I remember I was walking to the gym, and I was pretty miserable because I was just like, the business partnership was miserable. I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to be doing with my life right now? I don't know. And very much got the message, not an external message, just was hearing, you know,
Hmm.
mushrooms. Got to work with mushrooms. It's like this
Hmm.
is, and I'm like, what the fuck? I hadn't thought about mushrooms at all. You know,
Huh.
in a
Fascinating.
long time.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, that's kind of ridiculous. I'm just gonna ignore that. But it just kept happening again and again. You
Hmm.
know, so I honored that, and I was like, okay, if I'm supposed to be doing this, I'm gonna do this. Because it's very much about not taking mushrooms. Because I specified, am I supposed to take mushrooms? It's like, no,
Hmm.
work with others
Yeah.
with mushrooms. So that's when I was like, okay. So I kind of dove back into that, and as I dove back into that, the connections all just started coming back. like my guides were back. It was almost like I had to go through this whole 15-year or so bullshit um, in order to, I don't know, find, reconnect with myself, like reform
Mm.
that relationship with myself. I would say the
Yeah.
thing I tell other people to do, had to go through it
Right.
myself, which is just like reform relationship with yourself. Don't take 15 years to do it, but go through and,
Mhm.
uh, and so I started, just listening and um, asking questions of my guides, and also started really working on, okay, well, what do I need to do? What practices do I need to kind of like take on? So
Mm.
I started the grounding practice, at a base level, like kind of, that I described, and some other things as well. And the more I did that, the more my connections just kind of came roaring back, stronger than
Mm.
ever before, um, like in crazy ways. Um,
Can you give any examples?
yeah. Hmm. Thinking of one that's not a client. Sorry, surprise.
Sure.
Okay, yeah. So, So I mean, I started to have spirit come and show up, because uh, when you're kind of working in the space, it's like almost you're sending a beacon. It's like any kind of like
Mhm.
spirits that's still kind of, or souls who are still kind of stuck in this liminal space, um, who haven't quite like given themselves over to just go up, or out, or back to, uh, to being spirit. Um, they kind of come to the people who, are kind of like working between worlds, let's say, or
Mm.
walking with spirits. Um, so I remember, um, there was a few, but one was this girl who came in, about 10 years old, um, and was just very much lost,
Mm.
spirit. And this was someone I could see. I was actually sitting right here where I
Mm.
am right now. This is, just my little office, and so, um, and she came up, and I was like, "How can I help you?" Yes, and she was looking for her parents,
Mm.
and so I helped her just cross over completely. Um, I got a name. It was very. I got her name and stuff, and then I looked her up. I looked it up, and tracked it down to, looked it up later after kind of gone through, and like she helped her kind of cross over. Tracked it down to what I think had happened to her,
Mm.
which was uh, a murder,
Mm.
um, abduction, not too far from here.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was, so stuff like that was started happening, and that stuff didn't used to happen. I always worked with guides and spirit, but not just kind of wandering spirits, that would come up and say, "Hey, you can help me," like, "Can you help me figure something out?" And so I do that every so often now. Although I've learned to, because if you just leave yourself open all the time, uh, no concept of time over there. So it's just kind of like, oh, show up when you're trying to fall asleep, and you know
Right.
stuff like that. So I have office hours for spirit
Yeah.
sometimes, where I'll be like, okay, I'm here, I'm in it. and I'm open to whoever wants to show up. You
Huh.
know, today, or if they show up at a different time, I will say, like, um, tomorrow, tomorrow morning,
Hmm.
I'll reach out.
Yeah.
And it's
No,
like,
fascinating.
because you got to,
For
it's like keeping boundaries. Yeah, it sounds weird, but it's like, yeah, it's just having office hours, for spirit. But
yeah.
that was the stuff that started happening.
Hmm.
And it was very clear to me, is like, okay, well, I have a role to play here, and this is stuff that I have to really kind of embrace and take on.
Yeah.
And
Was that
yeah.
sorry? Was that part of any sort of a like a soul contract or agreement with your guides ahead of time that you're like, hey, if you're gonna help me out with these things in my life, and like my trade for that is I will make sure I'm kind of like facilitating this other helping the other spirits along this kind of medium path. And even struck me while you were talking about that of like I've never thought of this before, but like the idea of a medium, right? Somebody who is not like somebody who's in between, right, of both things. Like it's in the middle of
Yeah.
this being this bridge, right? So you're able to kind of help facilitate spirits with that.
I don't know if it was a soul contract. I
Hmm.
haven't. I don't know. It's weird. I'm not a big. Uh, I don't put a lot of weight in soul contracts.
Hmm.
Because I believe we have agreements here and there. Here's some things.
Sure.
I'm going to take on, and I think we sometimes have agreements with other people that I'm going to help you out. When we go down there, and that doesn't necessarily. People always confuse that with, like, oh, it's going to be my soulmate or some love of my life
Hmm.
or something. No, it could just be your coworker.
Hmm.
And that something, that something seemingly insignificant would happen, but it just kind of puts you on this right path. It's like,
Hmm.
or just kind of, it's like a check-in. So I don't know if it was soul contract or anything like that, but it was just something that's like, okay, well, I felt more like I'm being trusted to do this and make part of it. So I said I will honor that, and I'll honor that, and do the best job I can for both spirit and for people
Hmm.
who wish to either connect with spirit or just kind of like work on their own paths, you know,
Yeah.
in life, and so it's yeah. So to me, it's like almost like I look at it as just I earned some trust. So I earned a trust,
Yeah.
and and on a related note, when I look back at, it's easy. It's easy to look back and say, like, 15 should have gone through 20 years of, like, all this stuff. But if I didn't go through that, um, I don't think I'd be here, like, doing this
Hmm.
right now in the same way.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, both, like, I had to go through that in order, I think, to just gain a lot of knowledge and experience about the world,
Hmm.
like in a lot of
Yeah.
different ways. And then also go through a lot of different ways of, like, learning how to work with different people,
Yeah.
because that's kind of what I do now. I work with a
Right.
lot of different people, a lot of different, who are going through a lot of different things, or like experiencing a lot of different things. And, um, and, strong, I always believe, like, 70% of the benefit of what I do for other people comes from the delivery.
Hmm.
It's like, because you can have all the amazing information, or kind of see all the amazing things that you want to see for the other person and stuff, but if you don't say it in a way that kind of impacts in some way, shape, or form, and has a real impact, has it be heard,
Yeah.
um, it's useless.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. When you see a spirit like this little girl or the man in your room, um, I think and probably a lot of other people would at least initially feel very frightened and scared. Um, it sounds like that's not the experience you had, or if it is, you somehow got over that and became friends with these spirits or experiences and whatnot. Um, Yeah, do you feel yourself feeling fear? Did you used to feel fear when you would see them? Like, what is, and if not, like, why? Because that would definitely have startled me at some point.
Yeah. So I remember with, man, he was just so comforting
Hmm.
at a time when I needed like that comfort. That I just, yeah, I didn't feel afraid.
Hmm.
Yeah. That fucking bishop, I felt afraid. But that was more, I think, when I think back to it and kind of feel back to it, is that was more like it's the energy of the place,
Hmm.
you know, that I was picking up on. So no, that was comforting. And I remember that little girl specifically, I think I was startled at first
Hmm.
because I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah.
And then I kind of like quickly, it was never afraid. It was just like, oh, that's what it is.
Hmm.
So no, I've never, except for the bishop, never been afraid. Never had that
Wh-
kind of fear of like, when I see something or hear something or, yeah, there.
what was it about, like, the bishop and that kind of a dark energy, or this negative energy, or whatever it is, and I kind of want to dovetail that into, can you even just share about, like, what are, are there any dangers sort of in uh, accessing this part of the universe or consciousness or whatnot, of the spiritual plane? Like, as you, when we talk a lot of times very positively about spirit and spirit guides, but are there, other things that maybe are getting in the way, or creating pain, or is it just kind of like a sign to be like, oh, this isn't for me, like I'm meant to not be here one way or another?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, there's absolutely, there are places that I'll go to sometimes and I'll feel like, no, this is off. It's like,
Hmm.
and feel unsafe. You as far as working with spirit, there are, um, there are spirits out there that, they're generally more stuck in this the liminal like world,
Hmm.
kind of in between. And they, yeah, they can feel dangerous,
Hmm.
yeah, sometimes. But generally, if you don't go looking for that stuff, you're not going to get it. Nick, if you're not, um, looking for dangerous spirits that maybe, that are out there,
Hmm.
you're not going to kind of, you know, experience them. The thing that, I find like that is, that you have to be really good about in this work is psychic hygiene.
Hmm.
Like clean your energy, calling back your energy, and just, ensuring that you have, a form of shielding around you, that helps kind of filter, things in and out, and that, yeah, and that you're able to kind of really be in command of your energy,
Hmm.
and control of that. The Where I've seen people in this space kind of go a little haywire is when they're convinced that, there's like some spirit or someone who is telling them to do X, Y, and Z, and
Hmm.
completely upend their life, or like, just going on away. And it's like, no,
Hmm.
that's usually just the person. you know it's, it's like there is no, because you can have there, like, again, there are spirit within liminal space, that, just haven't quite let go of whatever physical like manifestation of anger or whatever that is keeping them here.
Hmm.
That can be dangerous. But when you're talking about spirit like that is, kind of, already on the other side, like they generally just show up with love. Yeah, there's no, um, there's no harm
Yeah.
that's intentionally caused. We
So
we, we
there's
caused
no.
ourselves the harm by putting ourselves, almost what we were talking about before, just being a little bit too much in that world and
Hmm.
not grounding ourselves in this one. Yeah.
So from your perspective, there's not really like a fear of, let's say, demons or other entities that are kind of actively seeking to harm or cause damage in different ways.
No, not from what I've seen. I mean, like I know that. Yeah, I've listened to actually. There's some demonologists out there,
Mm-hmm.
who talk about this stuff, and there are, but generally, demons, they don't really want anything. They're just gonna leave you alone. If you're kind of like working in that kind of like energy world, like
Yeah.
out there, yeah,
All right.
there's no
Cool.
real, like I do think there can be malevolence, like in kind of like spirit form, but it's really rare.
Hmm.
I think you'd have to seek it.
Yeah. Fair
Like
enough.
go actively seek it, or just you can feel it. Where I feel it sometimes is just tied to specific places where a lot has
Yeah.
gone on or something's attached themselves there and stuff. And even then, there's ways to kind of go through and just kind of clear that out. So
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah,
Fascinating. And then the last question I kind of like around this topic is very early on, you were talking about how through mythology we sort of create entities like with our consciousness, like by kind of, I don't know if it's about writing about them or believing in them enough or like whatever that is. And I was wondering if you could just kind of extrapolate a little bit more on that idea.
yeah. I mean, so as we've kind of like put, if hundreds, thousands, millions of people like focus on this being that's created,
Hmm.
we're in a sense giving form to um, the spirit.
Hmm.
It's like, and going back to animism, where there's spirit and everything. That spirit might have existed, but we're kind of like, oh, it's almost like a spirit kind of claiming that form and that kind of like, um, you know, energy within it. So it's like
Hmm.
I believe in like, we can use the, if we like to read fiction, or if we like to read, I don't know, comic books or whatnot, you can kind of call upon the spirit of,
Hmm.
Spider-Man, to kind of,
Hmm.
be with you, and
Interesting.
kind of
Yeah.
feel that,
Yeah.
do they exist as spirit in the same way, shape, or form there? No, but you can manifest them in that way
Hmm.
for you. Almost like manifest like a spiritual representation of that.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. When in my 20s, when I was feeling kind of down or whatnot, um, I would call upon the spirit of the Pillsbury Doughboy because because it would just make me laugh
Yeah.
and make me feel better, right? So and it was just kind of like I'd be walking down the street and just there he'd be, kind of like trying to keep up, so, I mean, it's just like kind of, like things like that, and like doing this little laugh, and and
Hmm.
there and it would just make me feel better. Now
Hmm.
you can, sure, did I imagine it? Sure, but imagination is key to creation. That's how we
Yeah.
create anything, you know?
Yeah.
It's like that. Um, so, collectively over the course of time, yeah, there are spirits that, we've collectively, consciously created.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's fascinating as you talk about that because one of the things that I often, I don't know if I've ever talked really much about this, but like one thing I often connect with for myself is that I feel very strongly that basically a lot of like particular with the Marvel universe, less so with, although somewhat with DC. Also, just I think DC is just less prevalent and seems to be becoming less and less prevalent. However you want to look at that, but like with the Marvel universe in particular, they are kind of our Olympic gods in a way of like our current generation, right? It's like they are these very superpowered deity-esque and some literal deities in there that we, associate with power, with different abilities, with different types of wisdom and guidance that I think whether we tune in them directly or indirectly, there's a level of like we're kind of seeking their wisdom even when we're turning into their stories, right? We're looking for the wisdom that they have to help us guide our lives through these tales.
Yeah, I mean, and then absolutely, and then, we can write fanfic and have that wisdom come out to us in those characters. I don't know, or everyone do them. Yeah. So what's funny about the Pillsbury Doughboy is the next relationship I got into after that. The woman I was dating, after I'd already been like, conjuring the Pillsbury Doughboy for a couple of years, her father worked at Pillsbury. Didn't know that,
so
until later.
That's
in
wild.
Our relationship. I was telling her about this. I was like, okay, well, it'll be a little weird. And she's like, do you know where my father worked? No. It's like, oh, okay. So here we go.
That's so funny. So funny. Well, Pheroze, this has been like an absolutely lovely, fascinating conversation. If people want to find out about you or work with you, where do they go?
Yep. So the best place to go is my website, Pheroze.com, and my name, because it's uncommon. The spell is Pheroze.com. That's got all information about, kind of my work with spirit, but also my work in plant medicine. I have a ton of education and information out there on that. And if you want to book an appointment with me, you can do it on there. I'm also active on Instagram. My handle there is @Pheroze Karai. So my last name is spelled Karai. And on Instagram, my main impetus there is just to inform, educate, but also kind of be silly. So it's so that's kind of what, those are the two places that I'm on online. I have a Facebook page. I haven't been on Facebook in over a year, so message me there. It'll disappear into somewhere in Mark Zuckerberg's billions of dollars. But that's so.
All right, cool. And if you like this episode, make sure to hit subscribe. And Pheroze, thank you again so much for coming on. It was a pleasure having you, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Cameron. Pleasure.
Thanks, Pheroze. Pleasure.